any way you can to get politically involved, and I don't mean purely party political, so that you can kind of take a bit of territory, try and change some rules, get a bit more space. And Deleuze and Guattari are said to be unreadable, so I've never read them, but I know they talk about territorialisation and deterritorialisation. So what that is you literally rewrite rules. So Europeans went into the Americas and deterritorialised the empires and how the indigenous works, and imposed new rules. So to me, the kind of green politics, the kind of fundamental thing is, how do you re-territorialise? How do you come up with new rules? And there's a fight for this all the time. So certainly the NHS, certainly the way the web works. So amongst the slight pessimism about consumerism, free, anonymous, peer-to-peer, they're absolutely massive. Battle over squatting, very, very important. So it's all about getting new forms of architecture, which I would say is based on property rights. And yeah, you've certainly got to change the culture as well. And to me, green politics is a big kind of culture of politics, which paradoxically why I'm a thorough non-believer. I think there's quite a lot of religious stuff which is quite interesting. There's networks like Wisdom in Nature, the Muslim Environmental Network, and there's lots of liberation theology stuff around ecology. Yeah, so it can be pretty pessimistic, but the economic economy we have at the moment really doesn't work. And there are certainly parts of the world where there's quite rapid change. And I think maybe we should think about lifestyle, but all the time it's thinking about the politics and how you get change, and then doing that in practical kind of ways. So I should probably give the Cuba plug, because I know whether you know the story that Cuba, they were very fossil fuel dependent, they weren't especially concerned with the environment, and then with the fall of the Soviet Union, they no longer had cheap oil. Also, they got interested around the Rio conference in 1992. And Roberto Perez, who's a great guy in case he comes to Britain, his dad, solidarity activist from Australia in the special period when Cuba was really suffering, they built a permaculture farm on his dad's roof. And I would expect maybe just the roof would collapse, but apparently this worked very well. Some of you may know that they've had the permaculture, so it's a way of producing food with low carbon, and they've put in wind generation, and they've done lots of things. So I've got some leaflets about Cuba. There's a couple of rock around the blockades, Cuba events, so I can pass some of those round.
Can I ask something from the chair?
Yeah.
I know Ken had his hand up, but you've spoken already.
I need to apologise for plastic bottle.
But no, I'm quite interested in what exists at the moment, which kind of are alternative areas of the economy. Tiny, but I mean, I'm an allotment holder, and allotments are a sort of commons, and certainly they have a culture of commonality and sharing, and also nicking each other's plants occasionally, but that's another matter. But the anarchist Colin Ward, if you know him, opposed to war, but very, very interesting ideas about the environment, about the commons, and about allotments and so on, and working in that kind of way. And I remember going to Czechoslovakia, not the Czech Republic at the time, just after the revolution, and people talking about a third way, and cooperatives as an alternative to the kind of centralised state, but also as an alternative to capitalism. It seems to me there's a whole lot of things that are there that we need to work on and develop, which overlap with your idea of the commons, really. Ken?
I'm probably going to ramble because my head's sparking with so many different thoughts, because it was such an interesting and rich talk, and so much stuff there.
That's kind of you to say.
No, it really was. I mean, I want to say, first of all, I want to agree with you about green piety. And I take a little bit of exception here to Brian's observations of other people's values, people next door's values. And I don't think that gets us further.
You can ask him why he's getting a new conservatory.
I'll change the policy.
They're building a new conservatory.
He needs to sell his plastic buses.
He's criticising the guy who's built his...
But I mean, I don't think it takes us forward.
We can all confess. confess. We can have like confession. Yeah.
I'm certainly going to Latin America this year.
As you were saying, Ken.
I don't know, I'm going to ramble even more now because I've lost my train of thought. I don't think it takes us any further to criticise the values of the guy next door, because by and large, people want to share in the culture they inhabit. That's the main human motivation, you know, it's not greed or keeping up with Joneses. They share in the culture that they inhabit and they've inherited. And we live in a capitalist culture, and it's that that's, you know, utterly despicable. I mean, I completely recognise the description you give it. I mean, I sit at home, you know, I might have read something from the Tyndale Centre saying, you know, global warming is probably going to increase to 4.5% to 6%, and that means a collapse of the of human population. This is worrying me to death. And then you sit and watch television, and you know that independent television in Britain depends on car advertising to keep running.
Yeah.
Car advert after car advert. And they said there's a new service being advertised every night now which gives you air miles, so you can fly wherever you buy it. Yeah. Consumer goods, you can fly somewhere. Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily want to stop people, you know, having the odd flight for their holidays, but it's the drive of capitalism which is completely insane. And I sit there and sometimes my mouth falls open because it is such a totally bonkers system.
Yeah.
And we have to change it. Yeah. I mean, I kind of take exception to that phrase eco-socialism, because I think the eco is unnecessary, because if you're a true socialist, socialist in the tradition of William Morris and Marx and Engels, the eco's in there in the socialism.
Could I?
I train of thought again.
If there's time, I want to take that up again.
Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, but I'm certainly not talking about the monstrosity that Stalin created in Russia and Eastern Europe. Yeah, we're talking about genuine socialism. I mean, you know, and Marx wrote about the economy. I first read the word usufruct reading Marx. I had to look it up in the longer Oxford English Dictionary.
Marx. I used to speak far more about Marx, but I did get him in at the start. I've got to get Marx and Ostrom in.
Yeah, I mean, John Bellamy Foster's done a lot to show that, you know, Marx was an ecologist. But Marx also said famously that philosophers have interpreted the world, the point, however, is to change it.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the world you want to create and you're interested in create is socialism.
I'm not utterly rejecting that.
No, fine. No. Okay.
Where's this going?
Well, you've read your Marx, and Marx is very clear about how you get to socialism. It's through class struggle.
Yeah.
Now that poses questions about Cuba. We can leave that to one side. But it does mean that, I mean, we can't ignore the immediate fight over climate change and raising the issue of climate change however we can. But we've got to connect that with the things that people are prepared to struggle for and are being pushed into struggling for. And one of those things is jobs. And this is why I think it's really important that we actually make that connection between fighting the environmental crisis and fighting the economic crisis. And the campaign for 1 million climate jobs is absolutely crucial to me. I mean, I'm not just saying that to push up a party line, but it makes that connection in a way that else does. Now, I think you've raised so many different things. And, you know, in a socialist society where there is a genuine democracy, many of these ideas will be taken up and developed, and there will be an enormous flowering of inventiveness, I'm sure. It's not just religion on my part. I'm sure that will be the case. But I think the problem with your, I was going to say train of thought, but your flowering of thought is incredibly eclectic. And we have to see the wood. We have to look beyond the trees to the wood.
I mean, to be honest, I'm just guilty that I'm so ruthless all the time and focused, really. I think it's possibly the presentation is somewhat unusual.
And that's because you're sparking out so many ideas, which is great,
Well, no, basically what I say is, like, it's about power and politics and democracy. Absolutely. And what's key is property, and how you own property, and that you have to have a serious politics for changing how that's done. And, you know, certainly the left, you know, it's got to look and see what's effective, what isn't effective, what the key agency is, those kind of things. You know, I think there's a danger of sometimes there's not enough emphasis on that, and you can sometimes end up with politics which is kind of ritualistic. That, you know, you do things because you think there's a particular way of doing things, like you have a march, you do whatever, and you've got to treat your rep ways of doing action, like Perrick was saying about forks and knives and so on, you've got to question those, to sharpen them up and become more effective. You know, I've not today mainly been talking about political strategy and tactics, and I could do, but you know, I would. Marx was always interesting, but you know, a lot of Marxist stuff on commons is forgotten.
And Engels.
You know, and certainly Engels. I mean, what I've got at the, I mean, Engels famously said, every time that we think we conquer nature, nature takes its revenge. So I could talk a lot more about politics and strategy, but maybe I should be quiet for a minute.
Okay.
I think
Yeah,
You
it's-
disagree with me?
we've only got 6 minutes.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
yes,
must
right.
get on.
About defending the term eco-socialism, you're right, but in the present situation, in the sort of transition to a socialist economy, I don't think everybody realises that socialism kind of, you know, that would by definition be eco-socialism. So I think as a transitional term, you know, especially, you see, the thing is that I think there's a lot of people who, like redundant steel workers, for instance, who not immediately perceive that eco-socialism has anything to do with their problems, because unfortunately the green movement is still a lot of circles perceived as a middle class hobby, and we need to get away from it. Yeah, we need to change, but I think that, you know, yeah, eco-socialism would do as a temporary death, so that people really know where we're coming. And you know, it might have been you that made it up. You've got to be red to be green. You've got to be green to be red. You see, but we've got to sort of be plugging that line all the time. That a true socialist society would be a society that's run on ecologically sustainable lines. But I think we have to use the term
And democratic.
you know, to be clear, you know, that the two are inextricably linked. Right.
Okay, thanks. I'd like to bring in Pete Murray, the Green Party candidate for the by-election in Dollis Hill.
Yeah.
This should lose me the election then.
You're not filming yourself. So.
No, well anyway, no, I better not, just in case. I'd follow up Jane's point. I mean, I think what some people forget here is because they're in explicitly socialist organisations of various sorts, and those of us who are in the Green Party, maybe unfortunately, aren't. We're in what could be called, if you're being charitable, a broad church, like they say about the Labour Party. But there are people in there. I mean, there's Jonathan Porritt in there, for God's sake, who's written a book which says that he thinks you can have a green, sustainable society with capitalism. I mean, the man's mad.
Is in
Mm.
favour of shower gas now as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, there are people like that, and when the left began to grow inside the Green Party, what we were continually faced with was this nonsense about green politics supersedes the old grey politics, and we're the third way. We're sort of floating above all these differences. It's complete bollocks. So we had to make our point strongly that you had to join the two things. That the ecological aims are only achievable through socialism, and basically the corollary is true. Socialism is only achievable through the ecological aims. So rise up, people of Dollis Hill, and vote for me.
What I would say is the closest we've got to some democratic socialism that works for people is Cuba, and traditionally Cuba wasn't particularly green at all. I'd certainly say eco-socialism. I'm a great defender of Cuba. I think Cuba, was very distorted by Stalinism. It's also distorted by the blockade, but is a wonderful example. And quite often I was put off a lot of the far left because I didn't think they were very democratic. I thought it was a bit top down. And the fact that it's a bit more bottom up, I think, is a real inspiration. It's not saying it's wonderful.
Give it
I think also, in some ways, I'm not knocking Lenin, but I'm a bit more inspired by the Iroquois. The Iroquois, the idea was that you have like 6 nations. I'm talking more about indigenous today than workers, and usually it's the other way around. But the idea is you've got like different groups that work together rather than it being traditional vanguard. And also really inspired Latin America by Bolivar. Bolivar seemed to be a really good example for all his faults of somebody who took territory and made changes. So I think we need to be quite hard-nosed. Now, if you do want to buy one of my books, they're a whole £6.
Okay.
And you should plug that as well.
Okay, I've got 2 things to plug.
Yeah, we've got to get out of here in 2 minutes.
Yeah, and we've got to really pick it back up quickly. First thing is on Monday 27th, this coming Monday, 6:30, outside Brent Town Hall. there's a demonstration against the cuts budget the Labour Council is making, which particularly impact on young people, the elderly, the mentally ill and the disabled.
And the leaflets are all about.
Leaflets are there to take away. At the same time, there's also this